All right, we are live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Your Money Matters Financial Empowerment Show as we seek to move the culture forward with all things money and finance so that your 2023 can be guided toward greatness when it comes to your money. Us and the good folks at cmpradio.net have a strong desire to make sure that our audience is on point when it comes to financial empowerment. So today's show, I have two very, very special guests that will be joining me as we talk about, we've talked about mindset. There are some things mentally and physically that can affect our finances. So today I figured this one's near and dear to me because I have a social work background, mental health, and things like that. Money trauma. We're going to be talking about money trauma today and the causes, the effects, and how we can heal from them. We have no idea how much these money traumas plague us when it comes to how we handle and manage our money. So I invited two individuals to come on to share their perspective and to help us to attack the root causes as well as to give us some hope on how we can heal. A lot of us feel behind. This money trauma causes anxiety, just different things that cause people to be physically and mentally unwell. So I invited Miss Sharani Pethick and Mr. Paz Simpson to come on and join us today. Sharani is someone that's based in California with also a social work background, a retired psychotherapist, and disruptor of oppressive systems and how we relate to ourselves and each other. Her goal is to eradicate ways we perpetuate supremacy culture in our relationships so that we can live in a world based on love and not fear. Her zone of genius is at the intersection of science, psychology, and spirituality, where she uses her superpower of seeing interpersonal relational patterns to help people awaken from the spell of supremacy cultures, oppressive systems in their relationship. Sharani shares her wisdom in her books, podcasts, and a newsletter titled Fierce Authenticity. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us today to help us to attack the root causes of money trauma. Mr. Paz, he is going to kind of tell us a little bit about him as well. I had a short bio, so I wanted to read that. But Paz, come off mute and just tell us who you are, what you do, what your passion is, what your mission is, and all of that. You might be frozen. Can you hear me?
No. I am as simple. Yes, can you hear me? You are good. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Am I good? Am I good? All
You're
right.
good. You're
I,
good.
I am past people. Yes, some people affectionately convenience engineer. I am a two-time author, father of four. I am someone who is a specialist in creation and also entry services.
Mm-hmm.
I am a person who is anti-violence, but we say violence when we think of violence. Poverty is violence, right?
Yes,
All
it
of
is.
these other we focus on, gang violence, gun violence, are only stems of poverty. So that's why as we listen to this introduction, she made me smile. Right? I live the same space that she lives in, really just working hard to make a difference. So that is why we are here. So thank you for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. So what did you identify? You said you work with folks in the when it comes to reentry, right? Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Nice.
So
Okay, okay.
former felons don't like to, right? They like to call returning citizens.
Mhm.
A good New Jersey has a program now where they don't even like to say re-entry; they say new entry, right? New entry, and they meet them at the gate. So everyone that comes home from prison in their county gets met with balloons and a welcome home and an introduction back into the community, clothes, and an understanding of what it is to come home, right? It's in many places and in many cases, people come home with no identification. They come home with no home plan, and then we wonder why we deal with recidivism, right? If
Mhm.
I'll give you an example, my only case that I've ever failed, and I didn't fail him; the system failed him, right? I won't give his name, but we'll T because T's back in prison, unfortunately. T was
Mhm.
15 years old the first time he got locked up. He did 6 years in prison. The last year of his prison sentence, he was in solitary confinement. So he went from solitary confinement straight to with no home plan and no ID. I paid him for weeks just to sit in my office. I don't need you to do anything. Just sit here, right? Just
Mm.
sit here and get reacclimated to life. We finally got him
Sure.
to a point where he was ready to go to work. Program had to pass off to a sister program, and the sister program wasn't ready to handle someone of T's and 3 weeks later he was in jail. After that,
Mm.
I decided we were going to hold from beginning right? We have everyone that state parole is does not go back. We're gonna you're gonna get a job, you in school, we're gonna allow you to right free
Paz, I'm gonna be
ones
honest
this
with you.
broke.
I don't know.
One with we start there.
You're breaking up quite a bit. So it's a little bit of a struggle
Hmm.
to hear you. So we're missing some valuable
I'm
jewels.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Technology is our friend, and sometimes it's nice to us, and sometimes it's not. One thing I've learned about it is that you get what you can get from it, and you try to use it to your advantage, but sometimes it's just not your friend. So I don't want to. I'm gonna come back to you so that we can hear a little bit more from you. But Sharani, come off mute and just kind of share with us a little bit about what caused you to get started in your journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much also for having me, Letha. And Paz, I really want to hear everything you're saying. Everything you're saying is so, so good and so on point to our conversation today. And Letha, I did not realize you also are a social worker and
Mhm.
with the mental health background. That's
Sure.
amazing. I hadn't realized that in our conversation leading up to today.
Mhm.
Um, and I can't even remember the question you asked me, but really, I kind of fell into um, really looking at cultures of supremacy and how we have internalized them and how they show up in us in our interpersonal relationships. So, I am a recently retired therapist. I retired in December 2022 after like a almost 20-year career in social work and mental health therapy. And And what I'm doing today is primarily supporting executives and their organizations where they're in no-win situations between this need for productivity from the top down, and then like employees that are disgruntled, unhappy, stressed out, burnt out, and on their way out from the bottom. And what I help people do is learn the skills and the tools of how to communicate and how to relate with each other, well, with themselves and each other. And so the cultures of supremacy and how I really started studying that actually came when I started addressing my own racialized trauma. And I did not know that I had a lot of racialized trauma. And I was working with Milagros Phillips. She's known as the race healer on social media. Amazing, amazing person and healer. And working with her, I got to see all of the things that I had put away, being of I don't know if I'm a first generation immigrant. I don't know what to call myself. I don't know which generation I land in because I moved here when I was 3 with my parents. So I'm not even like from here, but I grew up here. I'm a Cali girl through and through. And yeah, so it was looking and just working with her that helped me see. And at the time, I was in my psychotherapy practice and I started to see, wait a minute, all of these characteristics of white supremacy culture, these are all characteristics I work on with my clients when we're doing the inner relationship work. They show up with the patterns of better than, less than, not enough, perfectionism, imposter syndrome. They show up with all of that inside them, judgment, criticism, comparison, all those things. And I started to see this parallel. And that's what really like inspired me to go all in helping us dismantle this, because of course, we can try to change systems and from the outside, and we also have to change systems on the inside. Milagros says this thing about we have to change people's hearts, and as people of color, it's not our job to go break down the system out there. That's not our job, right? That's the job of the people who instated those systems. But our job is to heal our hearts. It's to heal the trauma that we have experienced from living under these systems of oppression for so long. And a big part of how we do that is look at how we replicate these same things within ourselves and with each other. And I'm really excited that our conversation is on money wounds, because as people of color, as an immigrant, for me, like there's so many stories and wounds that come with me and my background, and of course with you and our listeners here, right? Nobody is immune from this.
Sure. Absolutely. And realistically, it's important to mention different groups of people have different money traumas, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not specific to your culture or my culture. The experiences may be different, right?
Yeah.
From maybe the affluent or people that are wealthy, but there's some money traumas that lie within wealthy people or people who are a little bit further along. As we seek to close the wealth gap, it doesn't mean that people who are financially stable or ahead don't have money traumas as well. So I kind of wanted to tap into the root problem of how this all begins, and our habits are often formed from childhood all the way into what we take into our adult life, right? Childhood, whether it's poverty or environment or whatever it is, a lot of the times we learn our behaviors from our parents or grandparents. And there's a sense of insecurity around money sometimes that can translate into beliefs about self and create a feeling of scarcity. And that could really be a blockage for someone to move forward because of this mindset. And no matter how hard you try, you feel like you're struggling to get ahead, you're not good enough. You're trying to keep up with what you see on social media or on TV that's not quite real, and you haven't dived into the root causes of why things are the way they are. So that's a big part of why I invited the both of you here, because even with folks who end up incarcerated, right, it still stems from childhood experiences and choices leading into adulthood. So, I definitely acknowledge that different groups have different money traumas and different things like that. So, I want to give you both an opportunity to talk about some of the things that children may see or face that later puts them in positions to be financially traumatized. So either one of you could go first.
Yeah, I would love to jump in first if that's okay, because I'm like, I know the root cause. It's what I preach about all the time, which is all the systems of oppression and
Sure.
cultures of supremacy, right? Supremacy culture and all the structures it's built. And really, for me, it's important that we recognize that this is generational, and it didn't just start with you or me or our parents, right? Like it's been a part of who we are for a really long time.
Sure.
And the social worker slash psychotherapist background in me is like, of course, like we see these how people relate with money, right? Like I'm thinking of an experience I had when I was a little girl, being an immigrant to this country, always being the outsider. And I remember it must have been St. Patrick's Day, because we were at the grocery store and there was a cute little 4-leaf clover pin, right? And like my parents don't know St. Patrick's Day, they don't know Valentine's Day. They're just like, whatever, we're poor, we can't afford that. I don't know what these white kids are doing, right? Like that's just how they are. And I mean, that was back then. And I remember like I wanted this pin so bad because like it was cute, it was pretty, and I think it was like on theme with whatever was going on at school, right?
Sure.
And my parents said, no, I can't have it. I think it was something along the lines of what for, or we don't have money for that, or whatever it may have been, right? And so I must have pocketed it, because what I remember is getting in trouble when my parents found out that I had pretty much stolen this pin. And they were not pleased at all whatsoever. And so like it's stories like that, and I'm just thinking of stuff that I've heard over the years where, how many times you go to the store and you're, we don't have money, we can't afford that, right? But it's so confusing for children because you've got a cart full of groceries. What do you mean you have no money for
Sure.
that, right? And so
Sure.
the messages that we get can be very, very confusing also. So I'll stop there and give Paz an opportunity to chime in.
You're muted, Paz.
Like,
There you go.
there we go. And can you hear me go? Can you hear me
I
now?
hear it.
Awesome.
Yep.
So I got to see money trauma as at a different way, because I was the first black kid to go to a all white prep school. Right? So I came from Harlem, where we struggled, right? Where the kid, my mom was a welfare mom, and because I was really good at basketball, right? I broke the color barrier in my school. So I was the first kid to go to black kid to go to my prep school. So I went to school with some of the wealthiest kids in America. Their parents owned Canada Dry and Pennzoil and Umbro. Back then, Umbro was the big soccer short. You're from Cali, so I know you remember all the kids wearing Umbro, right? So these are the kids I went to school with, right? And they experienced money trauma differently. Too much money, right? I was sent to school. I was sent there to try to get away from some of the things. And like I said, it was Harlem in the 80s. So, I was trying to get away from the drug culture. At least that's what my mother thought, and sent me to this prep school, which enthralled me into drug culture even more because these kids had disposable money, right? Now I learned about ecstasy pills and all kinds of things. And before they even were talking about it in my neighborhoods, before it was popular on the TV, because I was around some of the wealthiest kids in America. Right.
Mm.
So the money trauma for me, my mom, me calling her going, I need $10 to buy the pizza to hang out with little Bobby, on the basketball team. And she said, I gave you the only $10 I can give you for the month. Figure it out, you know. And what did that do? Little Bobby got a drug habit. I know somebody from New York who'll bring me the drugs, right? So money trauma at different levels, like we were enthralled in all types of money trauma, me trying to escape poverty, them trying to escape wealth, right? So money trauma, especially for young kids that don't understand, like I remember my roommate wanted a Mercedes Benz and his parents bought him a BMW, and he was so crazy. He drove his car head first to total hit the car. That's money trauma. That's actually destructive. He could have died, but we weren't thinking about that. I'm thinking, I want to buy a pizza like all the other kids. You know what I mean? Like the kids didn't realize, because I was the captain of the basketball team. Like I still remember one kid asking me, where are you going for spring break? And I said, UCLA. And they said, you're going to UCLA? I was like, yeah, University of the corner of Lexington Avenue. I got to sell this crack so I can make sure that I can pay to be back here. You know what I mean? Like I don't think y'all get it. So money trauma, it's so real on so many different levels. And then I was there with like Korean kids, Spanish kids, so these kids all had different levels of pressure. Like my Korean roommate was the first Korean kid to make it in his level, right? So he couldn't let his family down, right? The Panamanian kid, right? His family was new, the head of Panama. He couldn't let his family down. And then you had just white kids with too much money, right? So they just, they didn't know what it was to let their parents down, but they also didn't understand, right, what it was to have so much disposable income, right, and how that traumatizes kids, right? When you can,
Yeah.
One of the kids had a $15,000 a week coke habit at 17. That's money trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? Her parents could afford, right, to put her on a rehab. She became a pro golfer. I won't give her name, but at high school, she had a $17,000 a week coke habit. So when we think about money trauma, we only think about it at the bottom, but it's money trauma at all levels, because, right, like she said, it's oppression, right? So a systematic oppression, both at the top and the bottom, to keep us all confused, fighting each other, right? So
Mm.
I do consultation also, because I deal with gang members. So one of the things that I said to the wealthiest man in my town was, you can keep building these buildings if you want to, but you can't keep raising the top, dragging the bottom, thinking any of us are safe in the middle,
Right.
right? If a race car is moving at 200 miles an hour, if the muffler drops, right, he hits the brakes immediately, right? Because he doesn't want to blow up and die, right? We don't do that in society, because that's what we really need to do, right? We have to hit the brakes immediately, right?
Mm.
So we don't all blow up and die. That's why you're seeing more kids with you're seeing more random shootings in schools and stuff like that. One of the comedians said it the best, and then I'm going to pass it to my sister, because I don't want to dominate the conversation. He said, when do we start, profiling little white kids like we profile little black kids, because they're the ones shooting up the schools in mass shootings? How many times does it have to happen, right? But it's the trauma that comes from having to be something that you're not. That's the imposter syndrome that I heard my sister talk about. There's so many different things. Like I explained to my son, I have a 16-year-old who's going through that right now, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and the little gang members will tell him, hey, you can't be us. Like, first of all, your dad works with all of us, so there's no gang that you can jump into, right? No one's gonna touch you, right?
Sure.
Second of all, you're smarter than you want to pretend to be, right? You don't have to be something that we were, right? Life is, and I understand he's 16, so I got to let him bump his head a little bit, right? Because we can't save them from everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we can protect them, right?
Sure.
From everything, right? We can protect them from everything by being involved, right? We can protect them from everything by telling our stories. That's why I love what our sister was saying. Like, it's not, like this oppression that we think of, right? It's not just oppression at the bottom, it's oppression everywhere because no one knows what they're trying to live up to. That's how you get a fool like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Right. That's how you get someone like her who can just spat out nonsense, right? Because no one knows what we're trying to fight against, right? Once we realize that the greatest fight in the world, right, is inner, right? Then we can deal with the outer, right? So when you think about the nuclear bomb, and then I'm gonna pass it off, right? The nuclear bomb was an implosion, not an explosion, right?
Mm.
That means it blew up from within before it ever went out, right? So that's what we're seeing everywhere. I live in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Look it up. We are America. We are older than America. The Liberty Bell is hidden in Allentown, not in Philadelphia, right? So when you think about it, we're a Commonwealth city. So most of the things that they test out in America, they test in this city. We're your
Mm-hmm.
guinea pig, right? When they first wanted to when they wanted to test out how they were going to test the laws against guns and all those things, that's usually here. We were the first city that allowed our DA to be able to federalize all the ADAs in America, in our city. So that means if they're losing in a criminal case, they can take it federal, without having to go through another. So it's a lot that goes in here, and those are all traumas. So I can go on forever, but I loved what my sister was saying. We need to see how we can help each other in this fight. So this is awesome.
This is probably a part one and a part two type of show.
I agree. I'm going to jump in because there's so much richness. Like, there's so much wealth in everything that Paz just said, right? Especially when we think about, like, and I appreciate you bringing up that, both of you actually bringing up that it looks different for everyone, but we're all oppressed by the same systems, right? And
Sure.
like, well, why do people drink and drug? Well, they drink and drug to deal with the oppression, right? And okay, and how does that continue to feed into these wounds that really are generational legacies? Like, I know I could go off on another story. I think I will. It's here, so I'm going to go with it. It just my I come from, my background is indentured servitude. So I don't know what enslavement is in my, what it is like in the genes, but I know what indentured servitude is. That's what's in my DNA. And that indentured servitude came about after they decided, okay, well, enslavement, we can't do that anymore. So how can we how can we tweak the system just a little bit and still pay them nothing but exploit their labor? Right.
Mm.
And so that is what is in my DNA. The British took us 5 generations ago over to Fiji with the promise of a better life, right? And I'm Indo-Fijian. There's Indians in,
Mhm.
Guyana and the Caribbean, right? Like, all with the same lies, all told the same lies. Well, some of the stories that I have been working through as I'm working through my own money wounds of late is, oh, like, it is so hard to trust the money or the promise of money because it lives in my DNA that they were told, oh yes, there's going to be a better life over here, just come, right? And then they go, and that is definitely not what they got. Like, they did not get a better life at all. um and so, of course, it makes it hard for me to trust that money is going to show up, or that, you can trust money or whatever. So, those are some of the stories that I've been having an opportunity to work through this year, as I am really diving in more to healing my own money wounds and the legacy of what our ancestors carry, because science and research, epigenetics, it shows that our DNA is literally altered to the stressors that those who came before us experienced. And so my grandmother, she was educated at a third grade level. That's as much education as she had. My mother-in-law and I were actually just talking about it. She goes, I can't believe your grandma, who was only about 8 years older than my mother-in-law, that she came here and in my language they say like kudari chalawat rahi, and that means that like she actually was out there in the fields, like with the hoe, like actually out there in the fields and hoeing. She goes, I can't believe that your grandma did that when she moved here. And I was like, yeah, right, because she only had a third grade education. That's all that was available to her. Now my mom, she was able to go to school to be an accountant. So back in Fiji, she was able to, it wasn't like a degree, but more like a trade technical kind of thing, right? And that's what my parents did when they moved here, because their whatever they had there didn't translate over here. So they got to go to tech school, trade school. That's what they did, right? So still no formal degree or certificate, but that's what they had. Well, I was the first in my family to go to a 4-year university, a 4-year college. I was the first in my like entire family here in the US that also went to grad school. Like, and so this is, I read this thing once that my sister sent it to me, and it said, our parents' ceiling is our floor. So like they bring us so far, right? And then every generation gets to build upon that and build upon that. But the problem comes when these systems continue to play out within us and we don't do the inner work to heal that trauma. And then we replicate those same cycles over and over and over. And Paz, correct me if I'm wrong, but last I remember from all my social working, there's often legacies of incarceration also, that is that's a thing. And I don't know the more appropriate word for incarceration. It's escaping me right now, because I know that that is not a humane word either, and I want to be mindful of that. So the word is
Well,
escaping me right now.
and you're right. So one of my biggest success story, right? I have is a gentleman named Jose. He was one of the founders of the Latin Kings. And he said his change, right, came in prison when he was spending Thanksgiving in prison with his son. Not as a visit, behind bars. Like his son tried to come upstairs and have Thanksgiving with him, and he said, "This is not where we will ever eat Thanksgiving together." Right? And that reality of now I have his grandkids and his daughter, so we've broken generational curses because they're now business owners.
Mm,
Jose just got his college degree, after 14 years in prison, 28 total, but 14 years was his last stint. He just got his bachelor's degree, working on his masters, as he has people now bidding on him, right? Because they want him in their school, right?
nice.
But it's definitely generational. But I hear your story, and I hear a thing, right, on why some of us are really successful, right? I hear a strong mother syndrome in what you're saying. Like my great grandmother was amazing. My great grandmother lived to be 104. You know, she was one of the first residents of Jefferson Projects in New York City. She lived there until she was 95 years old. She was an amazing woman, right? And she made sure that she raised the bar, like you said, right? She only had a I don't even think she had a fourth grade education, because back then, they were already working. She spoke English and Spanish, but she didn't learn formally. My father, who passed away last year, you know, was one of the first black men to have tenure in New York State. You
Mhm.
know, who was her grandson, right? He was you know, someone with three doctorates and seven master's degrees,
Mm.
right? Like he was a lifelong student. You know, he knew more about books than life. It's okay, right? But you know, he raised the bar where you know none of us can say that we don't have something to strive for, even though you know there wasn't much money around because he didn't raise his children. That's another story, right? What happens in the what when we start dealing with money trauma there, right? Where once he got to a certain level, my mother no longer fit, right? Where the look that he wanted or needed in order to hit the next level. So to leave your kids behind and have to, you know, come back and apologize later. He was a great grandfather. He was a terrible father. You know, he was so, you know, and but those are things that our black men dealt with, right? And still dealt with now, but really dealt with in the 70s and 80s, you know, when we're dealing with like the ending of the Black Panther parties, you know, and decisions that they had to make in order to, you know, survive and strive, you know. So some of the things that hurt us as children benefited us as adults. Like we still have the apartment that he got in 1973 in New York City, right? Is rent controlled, right? We won't ever give that up. Like my next door neighbor pays what 3 times as much as my little brother that lives in that apartment, right? So we can talk about the trauma, right? But I talk about the triumph, right?
Mhm.
Because you cannot spell testimony, right, without going through test,
Absolutely.
right? So we have to learn to not only celebrate the destination, right, but get our kids to understand that everything happens for a reason in the journey, right?
Mhm.
Like me and you have talked about this. How I asked my gang members, I said, "How many of you ever sold drugs before?" And nobody raises their hands, so I raised mine. I'm like, I was the biggest weed seller on the East Coast before I changed my life. I bought
Mhm.
Girl Scout cookie to the right, you know, to the East Coast. And everyone start and then be like, "Yeah, I did it." I'm like, "Oh, so you know distribution, right?" So we start to have different conversations. You have a flag in your pocket. You know branding, right? You know you got a whole set. You know high level management, right? So understanding right where we meet, right? Instead of judging, right? I loved what our sister said, and I'm going to say this and then pass off, right? One of the quotes in my book is, "It is not our job to judge, but our blessing to love." Right?
Mhm.
So if we stop trying to judge and figure out where the love is, like we talked about giving our gang members, we started count by dealing with counting the number of hugs we gave every month. How many times we got a gang member to actually hug me back, right? Heart to heart hug, so you can feel my heartbeat, I can feel yours, and you know that you're not alone, right? That's how we start to heal, right? Together. We cannot do it by ourselves. So I'll pass it to you because I love you and I can do this all day.
So what I will say is some of the elements that go into these traumas, a sense of safety laws, right? Where you don't have access to basic needs, right? Or not having access to health care that you may need, right? Um, and ultimately, even if you're just someone that worries about making ends meet, right? Because you're in a job where you might have hit the ceiling, even though you have this degree, you have whatever, and you're still trying to make ends meet for the basics. I was talking with a gentleman the other day, and he was saying his retirement, he's working in Luxembourg, but he's from here, and he was like, the retirement and things are built in to their what they do. So if you want to talk about oppression from country to country, this is supposed to be the richest country, but we are oppressed in a way that we're forced to fight for things that other countries are freely giving to their citizens: healthcare, access to saving and growing money so that they don't work till they die. Just different things that we're fighting to have. I was like, dang, I gotta get the Luxembourg, like, but those are some things that it starts out where our parents might be worried about making ends meet, or working at a dead end job. They're working super hard and still not making ends meet. They have employee assistance programs at jobs because they know that their staff is worried about how to make their ends meet because they're not paying them enough. So they have people that will come in to talk to you about these things. But whether it doesn't matter what your race is in this country, the basic human rights and things that you should have, um, they're not freely being given to you. So it puts people in a position to have to fight for it or work for it, or I don't have what this person has, or I don't have what this family has, so I got to do this to make it happen, or I got to work 2 and 3 jobs to support my family, and consequently I'm not home with my children. You know what I mean? Those create money traumas. Just the environmental part of it, and like Sharani was saying, things we're not conscious of because we're just going through it. But when you take some time to start to dissect things, and wonder why things are the way they are, why your spending habits are what they are you someone that's trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to have a certain image? Um, what are some things that people can assess? And either one of you can go. What are some things for people to start doing the work? And Paz, you talked about a little bit, but what are some things that I got to pull out of myself to recognize that A, I've been traumatized, right? And B, how to actually move past it to heal. So, Sharani, you can go first, and then I'll come to you, Paz.
Yeah, that's such a loaded question. It's such a good and loaded question. And I'm actually going to let Paz go first while I put my brain around it, because like it's like you just asked someone who used to be a trauma therapist how to pull apart like the money trauma. Like that's like really complex.
Sure.
So I'm going to let Paz go there first. And also in full transparency, like I'm still working through my own, and so
We
I
all
might
are.
be a little
We
too
all are.
close to it to
We
to
all
see which
are.
thread to pull on first. So Paz, over
Sure.
to you.
Okay, I'll go first. That's not a problem. I think the first part in understanding or seeing money traumas or any kind of trauma is to just recognize that I've been hurt. Right? Most
Mm.
people don't want to say that I've been hurt. Right? Where, I think you shouldn't really just isolate money trauma. And I heard she say I'm a trauma therapist, right? So I deal with trauma in its entirety, right? Because we are a full spirit, right? So those things, right? Most people who are struggling through poverty, right, are usually also victims of PTSD. So we
Mm.
don't talk about those kinds of things. You're both social workers, so you know about the ACEs test, right? Most of my kids that I deal with score high on the urban ACEs test,
Break
right? So
that
they're
down for the audience, though.
right.
Talk about
So
that so that it's in terms that our viewers can understand. They may
oh,
not be in
so
social.
yes. So what the urban ACEs test is a test that was actually comprises of 20 questions. And these 20 questions usually say that these kids are more likely to join a gang, be incarcerated, go astray, and there's little things that we don't think about, right? Have,
Mhm.
are your parents divorced? Right? Are you struggling in poverty? Right? Have you ever missed a meal? Do you feel safe? right? These little questions, are things that most people ignore, but are
Mm-hmm.
telltale signs of what makes it easier to recruit our babies to go left. Like, I live in a city where 1 out of every 5 students are homeless or hungry, right? 1 out of every 5 students are homeless or hungry. So the money trauma that's being passed along to all of the students, because not every student is homeless or hungry, but if 1 in every 5 students, and there's usually 20 kids in a class, that's 4 homeless or hungry students at least, right? Who can't concentrate or deal with anything, right? Like, I deal with them, the schools, because our punitive damage, right? A lot of times is to suspend children, send them home from school. But if those meals are the only meals that they're getting, we're not just sending them home from school, we're starving our babies,
Mm.
right? And causing a whole new trauma. So first is to recognize and realize I've been hurt, right? And then ask yourself, why does it hurt? Right? Because it hurts differently for us all. Right? Why
Mm-hmm.
why does it hurt? You know, because once we know that I've been hurt, right? I can, like G.I. Joe used to say, knowing is half the battle.
Right.
Right. So I can see that I've been there. So I can start, right, because emotions are just energy in motion, right? So I can redirect that energy because I can recognize that it's there. My son, like I said, he's dealing with something that's different than me because his best friend died 2 years ago,
Mm.
right? So that his best friend died as a hero. My son still doesn't get it because his best friend ran into the fire, saved his 2 sisters, and then ran back in to save his uncle, and they perished together. You know, so that's a whole nother kind of trauma. So money couldn't save my son, from that kind of trauma. But
Sure.
the trauma, for him, he blames on money, right? It's a money trauma, right? Because the reason he wasn't at the fire is because he owned a business at 14, and his dad actually got him a contract to be able to be a speaker somewhere, right? And so he wasn't with his friend to be able to help save his friend in his own mind, right? That's a whole different kind of money trauma,
That
right?
is
Because
so
now,
accurate.
yeah,
My God.
yeah, because he still says, if I wasn't there, I would have been there. And I said, son, you also may not be here because you may have ran in with Dinky too. That's the young man's nickname, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you may not be here too. So first is to recognize that I'm hurt, right? And then to say, why am I hurt? See, my son right now, my 16-year-old doesn't want to recognize that he's hurt. So I can't get him past to understand why he's hurt. Because he's
Mm-hmm.
he's hurting for a reason, right?
Sure.
You don't understand death. The guy who him and Dinky were together from 4 to 14, and he died at 14, right?
Mm.
And they were together every day. The only day they weren't together was the day that he died, right? So it's a different kind of trauma. So why? And then that, I think those are the things that we start to do to start to forget and to heal. And then, who is my tribe, right? If your circle doesn't elevate you
Mm.
or
Come on.
doesn't if your circle doesn't elevate you or inspire you, your circle is a cage.
Mm.
So I'll say that again for your listeners. If your
Mm-hmm.
circle doesn't elevate you or inspire you, your circle is a cage. My best friend, my business partner, the only person who I had doing legal business back then was murdered, right? He was murdered. And I realized that my circle was a cage at that moment, right? So I wasn't at that point, I wasn't religious still, but it was probably the first time I prayed in like 15 years, maybe longer. I said, God, this can't be my life, right? Like this, like, even though people thought I was successful because I was the top in the music industry, right? We were at the top, you know, we road managed darn near everybody. I just got off tour with Waka Flocka during the Hard in the Paint tour. So, that was his big hit, So everyone thought we were successful, but we were miserable. Money trauma, right? On tour with 60 gang members. 58 of them were useless, right? Money trauma, right? Because he felt like he was responsible to carry these guys around everywhere, right? They added nothing when he got harmed, right? None of them could fight for him, right? So
Right.
when you start to think about the traumas that we bring in, so who's your tribe is very key to healing, right? Sometimes you have to let them all go, right? I had to let everyone go in my life and then bring them back on one by one as I was ready, right? Right?
So you
Because
can impact them.
yes,
Absolutely.
and then impact yourself, right? Because there's nothing worse than being in a room full of people and still feeling lonely.
Hmm.
How many people go through that, right? There's more of people that really are that way, right? Because they're the imposter syndrome, all of the different things that they face with the oppression that our sister talked about, right? So they're in a room full of people feeling lonely. So I had to be okay with just being past, right? Just being able to smile,
Mhm.
right? Learning, and then the hardest trauma of it all was leaving being a drug dealer alone and then having to start over. I had a wife and kids at the time, who had a lifestyle that she got used to,
Mhm.
right? And the money trauma of dealing with that, right? So we're, as when I say, if your circle's not, inspiring you or elevating you, is really holding you down. Like when I got my award at Carnegie Hall to be a motivational speaker, the last thing my ex-wife said to me was, "You don't inspire me. How
Ooh.
are you getting an inspirational award?" And then I had to laugh, right? Because that was the freedom that I needed, because I would forgive everything, right? That was the freedom that I needed. I'm like, really, you at this, like I'm stepping on Carnegie Hall stage before Les Brown did it. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm a nobody, in the world. I just have a good circle, right? I had a circle that believed in me, right? When I had 25 cents in my pocket and starting over, I had a circle that saw something in me, So I had people who started to see that my smile was something that I wanted to wear everywhere, right? And
Mhm.
wanted to share. And when we say smile, is to see miracles in life every day, right?
This is the happiness engineer
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah, so we wanted to see miracles in life every day and share that with others,
I gotta go
right?
with that.
So here, so that healing, right, starts with, and I'm gonna give you the 3 steps because I do deal with this, right? It first starts with recognizing I am hurt, right? Then realizing why I am hurt, and then starting to check your circle, right? Because it's okay to be alone, right? Because you will find the right people, right? So I'm not going to get too religious. So we can go. You can call it the universe or call it God. I don't want to throw anybody off or lose your listeners, right? So but when you are in motion, right, the people will show up if you're willing to let go. Right? You can't get anything new when you're holding on to something too tight. You have to be willing to let go, right? So when I was willing to let go of my ex-wife, because I didn't want to let her go, because for me, the best thing in the world wasn't just being her husband, right? Was being a full-time dad. I have custody of the kids, so I don't mind it now. But being dad was so important to me, so I didn't want to be out the home. So I was willing to suffer, right? Because we talk about the traumas, right? The traumas of what it is for Black children to go out without a father, or the father to be absent from the home.
That's a
So,
money trauma.
those are real traumas. So I was willing to do what it took. Like I slept outside when I didn't have to. Like that's why me and my kids, I'm like, I was homeless for no reason. I had a full office, in a whole nother city, in a whole nother apartment. But my kids were here, so I slept in the park for a day. You know what I mean? Like I was willing to do that, and that what I was already a grown up, so that didn't traumatize me because I'd already been hungry as a child, right? Like those traumas as a child only made me stronger, right? What doesn't break you only makes you, right? So to start to realize, how did I benefit, right? So it's easy to talk about how did it hurt me, right? So once we get past, right, the trauma itself, how did I benefit from the trauma, right? Because there's always a benefit,
Of
whether
course.
we want to admit it or not. Like my mom be having us hungry for days allowed me to be hungry for days if I need to be. Like I'm good. Like I'm not there now. Like and
Right.
we glad that we don't have to be. But if I had to be, right, I know how to survive, right, without being stressed.
Absolutely.
I can still think through, right, and push myself into a position to thrive because my mother did that, right? A welfare mom made sure her boys graduated from prep schools, right? Her kid that they said was educationally dysfunctional, was the only one of us to graduate as valedictorian of his high school. Like she's amazing, you know, like so, like, but she still has hurt. She's 73 years old and we're still talking through her traumas, right?
Right. Right.
Because she was raped when she was 16 years old. She was a child prodigy. She was, in her third year of college when she was 16 and had my older sister who passed away. So she's still dealing with what she didn't fulfill,
Sure.
and she fulfilled it through her boys, right? But there's still trauma, right? So first is, admit that I'm hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say why it hurts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then build a circle of care, even if that circle of care is just with me, right? And then get a gratitude book. That's the fourth step, a gratitude book, right? Right? Because there's always a reason to be grateful, right? We are always living through a miracle, right? Even if the only two miracles that you receive today are life and breath, those are two miracles, right? Because try to live without them.
Mm-hmm.
If you
So
don't think
wait,
it,
wait, wait, because that's a mindset shift. The You just took us from the pain to the to the triumph, which is absolutely fantastic. I do want to give Sharani, because we are going to be wrapping up soon. I do want to give Sharani a chance to elaborate, but like I said, this is probably a part two show. I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface on some things, because the vibe and the information is so powerful. So this will definitely be a part two. But Sharani, I want to give you a few minutes to also
Yeah.
talk about, even if it's your own journey, how you began to heal.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel like, Paz, you just broke it down so simply that you almost broke my brain. Like, admit that I'm hurt, say why it hurts, build a circle of care. I have a whole page of notes, by the way. I'm learning such good stuff from you, and then stepping into gratitude. So that's just, wow, so powerful, so good. And I don't have anything to add to that. I feel like this would be a great time to close up the conversation. However, since you did ask, Letha, the way I started to see that I had these money traumas that I had to deal with is, to me, as a background, I joke, I was like a relationship. I was a trauma therapist disguised as a relationship therapist. And so, to me, everything is a relationship. And so, how we relate to like one thing is pretty much how we relate to everything. And
Right.
usually that's how we relate to ourselves, right? And so I noticed that like my relationship with money was just filled with stories. So many stories around like, oh, I don't know how I don't know how to like manage money. Okay, but I've been living on my own since I was 18 and I was always fed, I was always housed, I was always clothed, I always got to go places. So is it really true that I'm not good with money? Like, is that really true? And the more I'm growing into who I am and the work that I'm shifting into next, this next season in my life, I'm making money decisions that people in my life are not comfortable with.
So
Um, and that can like sometimes lead you to question like, but am I really bad with money, or am I breaking some of these systems of supremacy and oppression that tell me as a woman of color and as an immigrant to this country, there are certain, like there's a certain ceiling, right?
mhm.
Or certain things that are bad. Debt is bad. Working for yourself and not always knowing where the paycheck is coming from is bad, right? As opposed to go to work, get your paycheck every 2 weeks. That's good. Okay, but who are you working for when you go to work and get a paycheck every 2 weeks? Oh, you're working for the man. Like you're working for right. So it's kind of like it's such a it's so complex, it's so nuanced, and I would love if there is a part two. I think we have such great wisdom here to share, and it was just an honor to share this space with you, Paz, learn from you. Letha, thank you for the invitation. I'm leaving feeling full. I feel so filled up and full. And yeah, and that's just kind of how we roll, right? Like,
Absolutely. Realistically, that is the purpose of the show, not just to connect with the viewers, but how we can grow and vibe and help each other through our own money traumas. That's not to say that after we watch this show that we're completely healed, because we do have to do the work, right? We have to do the work, and we have to analyze, and we have to ask ourselves some tough questions. What is it that I am doing? What is my trauma? What are the root causes? And it could be poverty from a small child. It could be we have too much money and we don't know what to do with it. So ultimately, we're going to experiment. We're going to start drinking. We're going to start doing this. We're going to start doing that. Or even if it's lack of consequences, like I have so much money, my family is wealthy, and I don't have to deal with the consequences that come from my actions. That's a money trauma, right? So as we are respectful to everybody's journey and road, we do have to do the work. So I think that doing that, we definitely need to have a part B or a part two to the show, because like I said, I feel like we didn't even get to scratch the surface or even break some things down. I feel like we had some bullet points that were maybe not in order, but also relevant and important. So do me a quick favor and let me know, or let the viewers know how they can get in contact with you if they wanted to ask you questions or even see more about your mission and your work.
yeah. So I'll jump in on that one. My handle on like all my social medias is right there at Sharani M. Patak. And more importantly than that, I actually invite you to visit fierceauthenticity.com. That's where you'll be able to find my podcast, where I speak all about systems of oppression and how they show up in our relationships with each other and in ourselves. That's where you can find information about the book. That's where you can sign up and get emails and communicate with me there. So
Mhm.
fierceauthenticity.com is where I invite people to come and hang out with me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Pez.
I mean, I'm everywhere. You can find me, Paz Simpson, or the Happiness Engineer. Definitely I'm Googleable and easy to find. But if you want to connect with me directly, depending on what you need, right? If you need just some happiness engineering for me to be able to help you get your mindset right, you can go to myhappinessengineer.com. If you need us to help you build out your business, because one of the things we deal with is money trauma, right? So we help people deal with everything from, building their business credit, accessing government money, all kinds of different things. So you can go to joyfulfunds.com, and I'm there. You can email me. We can get together. But I just want to see us all win, right? The greatest thing in the world is to create win-win-win relationships. That's a win for you, a win for me, and a win for us, right? So
Mm.
that's what we're here for.
We are here for that, and I encourage you to support his movement. North Allentown, I was about to say Norristown, but Allentown isn't that far from where we are. Shirani's in California, but if you have a way that you can have support Paz or find out what you can do to help. It seems like they have a really, really good program of how they're trying to help people of all ages to adjust to life after being, what is it, the welcome home, from incarceration and things like that, or even his work with gang members. Because if we can reach people young, the same way that I try to teach my children about wealth, all the things that I wasn't taught, all the coping mechanisms and different things like that, I think is really, really helpful. So do reach out, and do check out Shirani. From the time that she and I spoke, I knew that she was going to bring something special. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to her. And then I'll do a small commercial break. We had an entrepreneur spotlight um, on the 4th of April. And I had a young lady on that talked about body butters and just health and wellness as far as her brand, Dark Beauty Insights. And she loved being on the show so much. She was so appreciative, Miss K. Marie, if you look her up on social media. But she did send me, for being on the show, she sent me a sample of her shea butter body butter, and it is absolutely amazing. The smell is great. It's not too oily, but it moisturizes your skin really well. And I really thought of her smile and her reason to love the skin that she was in as her motivation to make butters and things to keep us moisturized and feeling good about ourselves, no matter what shade of skin that we're in. So that was a little bit of a commercial break. I did
Okay,
tell
but
her.
Letha, you got to say it again. I need to write this name down. What is the name of her business that she sells
So
these body
it's
butters
called
under?
Dark Beauty Insights, right?
Hmm.
And she was someone that was dark skinned. She's brown skin, dark skin, whatever you want to call it, and she was ridiculed for her complexion. So she didn't get to love the skin that she was in. That's a trauma in itself. And so when she created this line, that was what she had in mind. That no matter what shade you're in, to love the skin that you're in. So she has body butter, she has oils, she has a few different things to moisturize and illuminate the skin. So I just wanted to plug her because, she sent me a gift and I just thought that that was absolutely fantastic. So that concludes this installment of Your Money Matters Financial Empowerment Show. I really hope that you were blessed today by these two powerhouses who made this feel like this wasn't even a full hour, right? We've been on here an hour and 8 minutes, and I feel like we could have went 2 hours, just because the feedback and the way that you all bounced off of each other and the interaction, and letting me throw my little insight in as well. I just am really grateful and appreciative. I knew the show was going to be special because of the topic. I just didn't foresee that it was going to be this powerful. So I just want to thank you both. I will definitely be in touch so that we can break some more things down when it comes to money traumas and how to be grateful. Because we're all at different phases and stages, and we're not necessarily stuck in the money traumas that we were dealing with when we were younger. Now it's doing the work and being older and knowing better to do better. So we will bid you a farewell this evening. You can tune in for next week when we will be addressing how to create an LLC. So, business and entrepreneurship, financial empowerment and literacy, and just leveling up altogether when it comes to money and finances is what this show is all about. So we will let you all go, and I hope you have a blessed week and a good evening.
CMPradio.net, it's the station. Listen, man, let's cultivate together. Bring us all your show ideas. Content creators, we're looking for that. Videographers, we're looking for that. You can be a